First, let me go to Professor Gu Minkang. Now, incumbent Chief Executive Liu Xin warned last Saturday that Hong Kong would lose its high degree of autonomy if his successor lacked Beijing's full trust. How should we understand this statement? What advantages does Carrie Lam have for the future of Hong Kong, being the candidate that's seen as Beijing's favorite?
I think this issue is really, you need to think about the initial consideration of one country, two systems. Under the one country, two system policy, one country is the priority, and under one country there could exist two systems. So the great autonomy of Hong Kong largely rely on the one country, rely on the trust from the central government. So I think the existing CE, Liang, Mr. Liang, his statement is quite right. He's talking about importance of the one country, two system, and he wish the newly elected Chief Executive Carrie Lam can continue to uphold this important policy so that Hong Kong can keep prosperous.
Andrew Fung, now the fifth-term Chief Executive of Hong Kong SAR has been elected. What is your view on the whole election process this time? Compared with the last election 5 years ago, what was the difference in terms of the competition between candidates from different camps? And where do you see the future trend in this regard?
I think this one is more smooth than the last one.
Okay. Mr. Fung, please go ahead.
You're talking about Andrew Fung. I'm Andrew Fung.
Yes, please go ahead.
Sorry.
Okay, sorry.
It's okay.
I think the process is more smooth than the last one because in the last one between Henry Tang and C.Y. Leung is very intense and with some scandal and so on. And actually, until the very last 1 or 2 weeks, we don't know what the results are. But for this year, it's quite smooth. And actually, before the election day, people will estimate that Carrie Lam will win the day. So I think for this one, it's more smooth. And also, all three candidates are from the establishment. Even the pan-Democrat camp is supporting one of the pro-establishment candidates because John Tsang is a high official, was a high official. So therefore, actually, we also see the unity among all the members, most of the members of the establishment camp. They are almost more or less united to support Carrie Lam, with only about 40 or 50 votes from the establishment camp supporting John Tsang. So I think the result is quite smooth. Of course, the popularity rating, Carrie Lam is lagging behind John Tsang. But I think this comparison is only relatively speaking, because both officials during the last 4 years or even more rated among the top list of the most popular official among the people of Hong Kong. So only in this campaign that the public relations work of the campaign of John Tsang is conducted in a better way and more effective way.
Now,
and so therefore, the widening of the gap is only relative.
Yeah, it is expected that Carrie Lam will be faced with a daunting task of reuniting the society of Hong Kong. Let's listen to what she said on this regard.
We have a lot of housing problems, we have a lot of education problems, we have a lot of health problems. So my first priority is let's tackle the easier things to try to demonstrate that we could unify people of different stances and opinions. And then we can move forward. And this is exactly what I describe as the favorable environment and conditions conducive to restarting the process of political reform.
Well, one of the difficulties in her job will be how to balance the leadership of the central government in Beijing and the Hong Kong people governing Hong Kong. Professor Gu, how do you think Carrie Lam could balance these two things in the future? Under the basic law of Hong Kong, how could she provide stability for Hong Kong and steer it into the future?
I think this is a very critical issues. As a chief executive of Hong Kong, he or she must serve as a bridge between the central government and Hong Kong. I think Carrie Lam, as a newly elected CE, she must firstly get full support from the central government. At the same time, she also needs to get wider support from Hong Kong. I think the most important thing is to listen to diversified view from general public and to select a very strong team to work with her. I think she must face a challenge to solve the relationship between the government and the Legislative Council. Certainly there's a various challenge ahead. I think she must work very hard to solicit the wider support from the general public in order to keep the stability of Hong Kong.
Andrew Fung, Carrie Lam won the support from the majority of members of the election committee, but as you said, the candidate of John Tsang enjoyed higher public support according to a survey by the Hong Kong University. Why was so, and what will it mean for Carrie Lam in her future job?
So as I said, the comparison is only relative during the campaign. Formerly, both candidates won high popularity rating among the people of Hong Kong. It's only a comparison during the campaign. So I think, of course, you're right. After she won the election, in the next 3 months, and then after she became the next chief executive on July the 1st, for the next 3 months, then I mean for the next half a year, she needs to do very hard to increase her popularity. I think she seemed to find a way by addressing simpler issues, livelihood issue, education issue, and so on. She will try to tackle the smaller issue first, and then want support from both camps. I think she may have a fair chance of getting what she wanted in this smaller issue. Yes. Before she tackled the more difficult issue. I think her strategy is correct.
My last question to Professor Gu. Outside the Hong Kong Convention and Exhibition Centre, protesters were urging for so-called genuine universal suffrage, a voice from the pro-democrats. Also argue that Carrie Lam didn't win the hearts of the Hong Kong people. Does her win affect the political reforms surrounding the prospect of universal suffrage in Hong Kong?
I think this is a very important question also. In fact, I must point out there's no genuine universal suffrage in the world. We are only talking about the universal suffrage. Yes, the political reform was started, and actually it was disturbed by the pan-democratic camp. And now they are again to say the genuine universal suffrage was required. Yes, we can hear their voice, but we also need to think about how to put forward the further political reform in Hong Kong, so the universal suffrage could be seriously implemented. But it was pity that because the original political reform was failed, it was because of the disturbance from the Pan-Democratic Party, and so the general public cannot vote their chief executive directly. We hope that through the further political reform, we can hear their voice, but we must uphold the general principle, which is the basic law, the one country system, and the National People's Congress decision on the August 31st. Under the general principle, we can further talk about the political reform. so
Yeah.
that eventually we can achieve universal suffrage.